Hello, and welcome to Scary Town, the Goosebumps and Fear State review show. I'm your host, Nightmare Nemo, and this week we're going to a familiar place, Goosebumps Horrorland, to review Who's Your Mummy? And there is the back cover. So, anybody got a bandage? A tomb with a view from mummies to dummies. Okay, so this is a really goofy story from, just look in the cover and the title, Who's Your Mummy? It reminds me of like, Who's Your Daddy? That kind of thing. And so this story is like Stein's way of creating a mummy story as best he can that is not set in Egypt, because I feel most stories that involve mummies, they feel like they need to be set in Egypt and in a pyramid and that kind of setting in order for it to be authentic and for it to work. And there's been other stories and movies that have, tried to do something different with mummies, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And in this, it in a way, like, it kind of cheats, but I'll get into that. So our protagonists are brother sister Abby and Peter. They've been staying with their Granny V. She's got an illness and she needs to go to the hospital, and it's pretty serious. And I think there's she has something wrong with one of her organs, like a liver or something. And so she needs to be treated, and she's going to be out for a while, like after the surgery. So there's going to be nobody to take care of the kids. So she suggests, you're going to take a train to Uncle Jonathan's. He lives in this town, this small town, and you're going to go there and everything's going to be alright. He's going to take care of you. He's a little eccentric, but I think it's implying that he's supposed to be rich, and he has this really crazy mansion or whatever. So that's the setup. But what happens is once they get there, they're greeted by one of the other neighbors in the neighborhood where Uncle Jonathan's house is, and is like, oh, you're gonna go there? Oh, you should, just stay away from that place. It's bad news. And so they go there, and Uncle Jonathan is there, and he greets them, and he is pretty well off. He's got a maid and a kitchen staff and all that kind of thing, and so he sets them up, and they have this Egyptian looking black cat or whatever. It's just really doesn't like them for some reason. Just kind of gives them these cold stares and stuff. It's very suspicious. And so this story kind of cheats in that it might as well be set in a pyramid, because Uncle Jonathan is obsessed with Egypt and the pyramids and mummies. So he's used his wealth to make his whole house look like the inside of a pyramid with hieroglyphics and relics and whatnot. He even has an entire room where there's sarcophaguses and of mummies there, and it's oh, this seems very odd, for somebody to have this big of an obsession with mummies and whatnot. And so Peter is he's really into mummies. Of course, just like the Curse of the Mummy, you always have that one kid who's oh, mummies are really cool for some reason. And so Peter's really into it, and Uncle Jonathan shows him one of the mummies, and the mummy is actually of a little boy. And it's interesting to note that the young boy mummy is usually the mummies show signs of wear over hundreds of years or whatever, but this one doesn't. It looks like he's really fresh and preserved. So that's a little hint of something not quite right, you know. So these kind of spiral along. The twist coming along is pretty good. It really sets up, for like a really interesting and climactic end that it becomes like really suspenseful. But the way, the way the kids dispatch the antagonists, I'm not going to say who they are, so I'm going to ruin the ending. But the way they dispatch them is, I really don't want to ruin it, but it's really silly how they dispatch them, and yeah, it's funny. So there's this strange man in a black trench coat that tries to come up to the house one night, and he apparently the Uncle Jonathan has control over their bats, and so the bats attack the man, and he just like runs off. So that's very strange. Other things very strange, like in the night the kids hear the mummies and stuff. I will say this. You'd think the mummies would play a bigger role in this, but they don't. And it's not really that much of a spoiler, because if you remember in the Curse of the Mummy, the mummies kind of had, in the very end, they had a role to play, but they really were not the enemy, and this is the same thing. It's very strange. It feels kind of like you're misled, and there's some really disturbing stuff happening here. I don't want to go into it, but it is a little gross and just awkward. It's like, okay, that happened. I thought this was supposed to be a kid's book, but I guess that's okay. Anyways, maybe I'm making it out to be a bit more worse than it is. So that, it's perfectly fine. It's, like I said, it cheats in a way where, like, the house looks like it's an Egyptian temple, and it has mummies in it. So, yes, it's not set in Egypt or in a pyramid, but it might as well be. So, it's one way to get around that. And, the story is perfectly fine. It's goofy, very much so, in parts, maybe to offset some of the creepy stuff that happens, like I said before. So kind of alleviates the darker moments, and it is very interesting, and the twist is pretty good. But that's it about Who's Your Mummy. I feel it's really a middle of the road kind of book, and not nearly as good as Dr. Mag vs. Robbie Schwartz as far as being an original story in the Horrorland series, where the other books were all sequels. And so this really doesn't stand too well on its own. It's not really great, and it's not really bad. It's just kind of, it's in the middle there. So I would recommend reading it anyways if you're really into the Horrorland series, because you kind of have to, because you want to see what happens in the park and stuff. And in that, there's some more developments happening there, and more stuff with Byron and whatnot, and the kids get closer to finding out a way out of the park. So that's as much as I can say about that. Alright, so that's it. Have you read Who's Your Mummy? Are there any Horrorland books that you're looking forward to? Just let me know down in the comments, and I look forward to checking out what else happens in Horrorland. Me personally, I'm really excited to see how the story goes in, and we're going to have another new book that's not a sequel to another Goosebumps book. So that's always interesting. As much as I like the sequels to previous Goosebumps books, the new ones I feel are even more exciting because it's, I don't know what's gonna happen. I was really surprised by Dr. Maniac versus Robbie Schwartz. That was a really great story, and it is really fun. Alright, so that's it for this week. Next week we're going back to review another classic Goosebumps story, and I'll see you guys next time.